I want to start briefly by talking about the difference between demand, desire, and drive. And I'm going to try to map what I'm saying onto that a little bit. It won't work completely, and I'll maybe, I'll say where I think it doesn't work. But basically, you can think of three types of want that are going on simultaneously within us. And in psychoanalysis, this is, I think, very, very well thought through. And they're called different things, but usually demand, desire, and drive are pretty much right. Demand, sometimes people call that need or whatever, but I like everything beginning with the same letter. So demand is really what you see most purely in an infant. A demand is you have a need for water or for food, for warmth, for sleep. Very basic want that has an object that can satisfy it. So that's the most basic type of want. You want an object and you cry, and if you're lucky, you receive that object and you're satisfied. Now, often that's all people think a desire is. We want something, we want an object, we seek it out, we try to, kind of watch self-help videos or whatever to help us get what we want, whatever it is, a partner or a movie deal or an ability to bake a cake or play tennis or whatever it is, and we want that object, we get it, and we're satisfied. But most of us know that we're a lot more complicated than that. So the second level we can talk about is desire. And again, I know we've covered this before, so I'm just going quickly, but desire is not so much for an object, but is often a good way of thinking about it is desire is for a lost object. You can think of the original lost object being the mother. Mother is the name of God on every child's lips. There's a sense of loss that we have, most of us, whenever we separate from the mother other. We say there are exceptions to this whenever in, say, autism, where the symbiosis doesn't seem to have held, or in psychosis where separation doesn't occur in a clean way. But when we, in a sense, individuate and start seeing ourselves as separate, as other, we can feel that we've lost something. And again, very simply speaking, we can think of everything as a substitute then, right? So almost it's like a third comes in, the paternal function, and says, well, you can't stay at your mother's breast forever, but you can win a prize for running a race. There you go, right? So you have to now get a substitute pleasure, and the substitute pleasure is public enjoyment, not private enjoyment, but public enjoyment. If you think about it, like private enjoyment might be reading a book, and public enjoyment is you taking an Instagram video of you reading the book, right? So you get the substitute enjoyment of people thinking that you're enjoying reading the book, and to a certain extent, there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what desire is. There is no real private enjoyment, there's lots of good stories around that. I won't tell any stories, but the idea that we like to think that we don't care about the other, that we just privately want to enjoy, but that's lost to us. We're in the world of symbolic enjoyments, and that's brilliant because it means that we have to interconnect with each other. I care what you think, and you care what I think. Maybe not literally you and I, but you care about other people, what other people think. And so in some respects, desire is always a bit futile. It can seem depressing, right? Is that you never get back to the purity of that private enjoyment. Little moments when it feels amazing or whatever, but generally we desire mimetically. We move from one thing to another, to another, to another, feeling rarely very satisfied at all. And this keeps us going. This creates creativity. I mean, if we were all... This is called the incest taboo, by the way, in anthropology, where there is a taboo against staying in the private enjoyment of the parental private enjoyment. So you have to kind of go out and do something in the world, and hence we have microphones and computers and all of that, again, to simplify. But that's desire. So desire never gets satisfied. So demand is for an object, desire is for the lost object. And then the most interesting of all, which is drive. And drive is for loss itself as an object. So as I say, we've got demand for an object, desire for a lost object, drive is for loss itself as the object. And that means, in short, that there's a dimension of us that wants not having, that wants a type of failure, a type of impossibility, a type of struggle, a type of sacrifice. This is not simply something that some people struggle with, like anorexia or gambling, where nothing, for the gambler, losing becomes the addictive thing, not the winning. The losing is somehow what it is that connects them. Or in anorexia, there's a lack of eating. But there's a sense in which those are extreme cases of something that is within us all, when you can only desire someone who's under threat of being taken away, so you have to be jealous. Or you can only desire someone who's impossible to get, and as soon as you get them, your desire kind of dissipates. These are all different ways in which impossibility plays out in our lives. The difficulty is this is unconscious. When we get to drive, we get to the unconscious. And in a very precise way, it's unconscious because we can never consciously want lack. The perverse structure is maybe the closest to that, but even then, it's complicated. So, ultimately, you could say at a conscious level, we're all utilitarians, right? At a conscious level, we all want to maximize our pleasure and minimize our pain, but right behind our backs, we are getting enjoyment out of self-sabotage, out of failures, out of creating problems from ourselves. Like, for example, when a very famous actress steals clothes from a fashion store. She doesn't have to do it. She's got all the money she needs. Why? She's sabotaging herself by, doing this crime. Or it kind of manifests in lots of different ways. And the issue is not to get rid of this drive, but rather to orient oneself around it well. A great example of this is in Ireland. If ever you come to Ireland, if you come to Wake Festival or anything like that, you'll know that in Ireland we have a very sophisticated grammar around the buying of drinks. And it's very complicated for anyone who's not from here. I have my great friend Jay has come to Ireland many times, and I've tried to explain to him how buying drinks works. Because for the first couple of times he came here, he didn't buy any drinks. He said, the Irish are so generous, they're just always buying me drinks. And I was like, well, no, but you have to buy drinks back occasionally, right? Especially when you're a guest, of course, people buy rounds. But then occasionally you have to buy a round back. And he says, okay, when do you do that? And I was like, okay, well, you kind of keep a vague eye on it. You don't have to do it on the same night. But like if you've got like 3 or 4 drinks for free and there's 3 or 4 people gathered one night, you buy the round. And he said, well, what if I've got less money than the other people? And I was like, well, then what happens is people will say no. They'll say, oh, no, I don't need a drink, right? And they'll wait for a few minutes and then they'll go and get a drink. And then he said, okay, and what happens if you don't drink alcohol? And suddenly what I realized was this, you could write an encyclopedia about how subtle this sacrifice occurs that creates a social bond. But it's something that we all know from Ireland, right? So we can navigate it very, very well. But it is a navigation around sacrifice, around gift, around something that's not economic, right? So there's a loss and there's a lack that's going on, that's creating the social bond within the bar. If you had a society where everything was exchange, there was no gift giving, going to a party, you didn't bring a gift, after having food at your parents' house, getting out your wallet and giving some money to your mum, whatever it is, this would be the collapse of the social order. because the social order requires sacrifice, it requires lack. So this idea of lack is not negative or positive. It's part of what it is to be a creature of desire and a creature of language. And it can be the thing that destroys us, and it can be the thing that inspires us. And so it's the best and the worst.